Okay, so we're on our last video slideshow about public relations, chapter number 10. And I did have a year in public relations, so I can speak about it with some authority, but mostly the differences between PR and journalism, to get at what the differences are between those, and then also the differences between PR and advertising. Advertising you pay for, PR you don't. So what is public relations? Let's take us back to the basic kind of definition. Every organization has a story to tell, and the PR professionals are the ones that will tell it. Businesses and organizations have to get their message out, and they encourage media coverage, and they want a positive image out there, and they don't want to necessarily have to pay for it through advertising. So they use a lot of different ways to go about it. They identify a goal, craft a message, and then watch the results, see how much coverage they get in the media and track it. Again, I said I spent a year in public relations. I worked with an organization called Physicians for Human Rights. This is a white paper we put together in order to get the word out about AIDS in Africa and trying to keep doctors there. So it was a nonprofit. It was a human rights organization, Physicians for Human Rights, and we identified the goal of trying to get our government more aware of AIDS in Africa and what was called brain drain, the fact that a lot of African doctors were leaving the country because the pay was so low, the conditions were so miserable, and they weren't affecting a positive change in the AIDS crisis. So we put a paper out, and you can see it's got a little image on here. I'll come back to some of that. But once we got this out, we wanted to look for different clips in different papers, so monitoring the result. And again, I'll come back to this as well, but the New York Times ran an op-ed piece about it, or an editorial piece, so signed off on the editorial board. And that's kind of like the best you can do, right? Is getting a positive result from the publication of record. So we monitor the results, right? And that's one of the things that PR organizations are always trying to do, to quantify, to see if they're making the impact that they set out to. So what PR is, it's a discipline that looks after reputation of an organization, tries to support and influence behavior, and it's a planned, sustained effort to maintain goodwill and mutual understanding between the business and the public that it's serving. And so what's the nitty gritty of it? Writing news releases, organizing news conferences, coordinating crisis communications, crafting an organization's public image. All these things are part of it. And then if you're launching new products and services, how do you plan that out to make them happen? And, think about examples in your own life of products or organizations that you've heard of and followed. So again, the nitty gritty: produce newsletters for the media and employees, sponsor tours, exhibitions, special events, attend conferences and deliver speeches, just trying to get the word out again, acting as the organization's PR person, spokesperson. And then what I was mentioning earlier is how it differs from a journalist versus a PR specialist. And they really are very different. You don't generally go back and forth between the two. Once you go PR, you don't generally go back. PR is more money, but it has a different value set than the journalists do. So the journalists will serve the general public. The PR serves organizations, right? They want their reputation to look good. But the journalist isn't taking any sides. The PR is promoting their specific clients, has an agenda. The journalist tries to control all the information. The PR specialist provides information. The journalist, yes, depends on PR, and the PR depends on the journalist. So there is kind of a symbiotic relationship between the two. Journalist tends to use one form of media, not always, but primarily one, and then still multimedia in their delivery. But the PR specialist is going to employ a range of medias, no matter what. Journalists tend to be more individualistic. We're moving away from that a bit as multimedia demands more kind of competencies and merged competencies. But PR specialists are generally team players. I was editing this when we put out a news release. I had maybe 10 or 15 editors on it. It was awful. But we work as a team because different parts of the team have different goals. Journalist's goal is inform the public. PR specialist's goal is create goodwill. Okay, advertising versus PR, I mentioned earlier. Advertising tries to seduce us. It really appeals to our emotions, whereas public relations tries to appeal to our brain much more, tries to motivate with fact. Advertising controls the message, and back PR, like we saw in the last one, provides information. Advertising can be really flashy, a lot of exaggeration. We call it hype or puffery. PR is more low key and serious. Advertising can be very expensive. Think of the Super Bowl ads. PR is relatively inexpensive. Advertising relies on repetition. That's what research says. The more you repeat a brand name, the more you're going to have people reach for it in the aisles when they go to the grocery store. So over and over and over again. PR tries to be more fresh. Advertising is looking at a broad audience, and PR generally is looking at a little bit more specific audience, tailored audience. Advertising, people try to avoid ads. Netflix, Amazon try to avoid ads at any means. Skip this ad when you can. But PR, people actually seek out the stories. So planning a public relations strategy requires efficient communication. You want to figure out internal and external options. You want to plan your teamwork, right, and coordinate between team members. It also requires a lot of research. First step would be analyzing the situation, then planning a strategy, implementing the plan, and evaluating results. Analyzing the situation, you want to write a problem statement. Who is the most effective or involved? What exactly define your problem? When and where does it matter most? And why are we concerned about it? And how does this affect our public? So looking at answering all those questions, and probably in a group setting, planning the strategy again, writing a problem statement. Who are we trying to reach? What will our message be? When should we deliver our message? This we released at a conference in Thailand, and we did what's called embargoing it. We didn't let other people report on it until after a certain date. And we tried to make it very like a cornerstone of the conference. So we had a specific time we would do it, and we had a specific place at this AIDS conference in Thailand. Where should we target our efforts? How do we distribute our message most effectively? So which media outlets are we going to target? If it's ones that we had to look at ones that would be concerned about AIDS primarily. And so the New York Times is a pretty good match for that. How do we distribute our message most effectively? Again, New York Times has a pretty broad reach and reaches a lot of policymakers, and that's what we were looking for. Planning a public relations strategy, matching your message to the most effective medium. News release, is at least half of the content from newspapers originates from news releases. Kind of surprised. I feel like we always threw them out. Video news release. And then matching your message, you can do other written communications, newsletters, pamphlets, brochures, and position papers, and that's exactly what this was, a white paper, a position paper. Byliners, articles, right, op-ed pieces. We wrote a lot of, when I was there, we also wrote a lot of op-ed pieces and got them placed in the paper. Websites, matching your message. There's other interactive PR options. You can have people make speeches, do news conferences, have special events, and have exhibits, lobbying of politicians, generally in DC. Media kit. With this, we also had a media kit, a package, a folder with all sorts of information in it, an executive summary, the highlights of this, who to contact. So media kits are very popular. It has promotional material, and you craft it in a way, and that's why there's such a relationship between PR and journalism, is you craft it a way so that reporters will say, this will make a good story, because you're thinking like a reporter. So a lot of the PR programs still have journalism classes because you need to think like a journalist in order to pitch to a journalist. And that's why a lot of journalists, when they decide they want to make money in their lives and maybe have things be a little bit less hectic, it's still hectic, but we'll consider PR. News releases provide ideas and information that become news. You want to have newsworthy information, clear presentation, and develop relationships. So much of this business is really developing the relationships. So you get to be friendly with these people, make phone calls, check in. Why issue a news release? Promotes an upcoming event or appearance. So certainly this was coming out. We want to send out a press release that it's coming out. Convey breaking news, announce personnel matters. Maybe somebody's being hired. You want to let in your organization, or you have a new CEO, you want to let that be known publicly, publicize a milestone. We just turned 25 as an organization, present statistical data, alert citizens about health and safety issues. Sometimes Jewel had or no, not Jewel, but Tylenol had a terrible scare, but it was in the Jewels around the Chicago area. And they had a terrible scare that there was cyanide in their pills, and they had to pull them from the counters and they had to issue a health warning. And doing that as quickly as possible and getting the word out helped them recover from a horribly damaging crisis. Update on community causes. How do you make them better? Use an engaging headline, get a compelling lead. Remember, that's the first sentence or two. Don't distort. Don't use jargon. Use proper newspaper style, right? Because you're pitching to newspapers. Keep it crisp and tight, just like news writing. Stress the benefits. Emphasize the positive. Proofread carefully. Deliver the right release at the right time to the right person. All these things. So when dealing with the media, you do want to customize your pitch, so you know what the publication is like and you prepare yourself. You don't want to make demands and tell them what they should be doing. You don't want to go off record either. So keep it on the record. There should be no reason to do that. And then don't keep score. Oh, they got one story for us, so we like them. They owe us one, right? And don't bribe reporters. You don't have that kind of power in relationships, and you shouldn't be bribing them. That's completely unethical. Don't be cagey or evasive. Be pretty honest. Definitely don't lie. So there are ethics in PR. Two sides to every story. Who decides? Every story has an agenda. Every newsmaker has a stake in the outcome. So you want to do some rethinking, reworking, and fact-checking, and look for opposing viewpoints. There is like a code of ethics, similar to what they have in news writing. Be honest and accurate in all communications. Act promptly to correct mistakes in your communications. Don't be deceptive. And then there's some terms that we want to know, because it does happen. I mean, it can be a deceptive medium. I'm going to encourage you to watch the clip, The Wag the Dog. Doublespeak, language crafted to disguise, distort, or evade the truth. We've seen plenty of examples recently. Euphemisms, inoffensive terms substituted for more disturbing words. So instead of died, we might say passed away, or is singing with angels or something like that. But we avoid those. We want to just use the regular words. Cherry picking is literally picking out the facts that support your argument, selecting the facts that do that. Glittering generalities, vague but emotionally appealing abstractions. Bridging is transitioning to a question to a more comfortable topic. Let's think now we call it pivoting too. Non-denial, denial, criticizing the criticisms. Oh, well, that was just a terrible thing to say. That wasn't right. They don't know their information. They're liars, without saying, but they were right, right? So it's not denying, but it's attacking the criticism. Astroturfing, astroturf is like that fake grass. So it's creating an illusion of widespread grassroots support. So again, this could be the Russian scandal. Interference with Facebook, managing the news, planting questions at press conferences. So all of those would be inappropriate practices. Well, congratulations, you are done with the video slideshows and the narratives. And we'll see you back online for your Break the News project.